And what is the Armageddon position? So this funding is even more critical today than it was of last week. It's the most imminent form of us refinancing you all out. As Pete said, we have done everything our end. There is no more work for us to be done. We're not going to say that there are more tasks. We're not. There isn't anything until we're told otherwise. There isn't anything else for us to do for this funding. So it's really important that we protect that funding line as much as possible. One of the questions we've been asked, is can we give some more detail on the funding? Who's the funder, etc. And we can't. We're very protective over it due to confidentiality provisions in our agreements with them, which is the overriding factor, and the fact that we don't want to endanger that funding line in any event. So going forward, we over the next 7 to 14 days, we will get more clarity on what the FOS scheme challenge is going to look like, whether or not the challenge is even going to go ahead, because the whole crux of the hearing on Monday was to see whether or not they have permission to appeal. There is an underlying consensus that they will get permission to appeal, although one of those parties might be prejudiced and refuse permission, which seems a little bizarre. If one side gets to tell their story and the other does not. So we're going to need a lot of clarity in the next 7 to 14 days. We don't have that clarity as of today. We want to show you that it's not all doom and gloom. We are now, our law firms, I should say, are now looking at the Angel decision and what bearing that will have to whether or not that is the correct avenue now to force these cases through to settlement. Okay? If the cases do go through the court system, finish in the court system, they go back to where they started, back into a litigation atmosphere, that's actually more beneficial to our law firms. You can recover your costs because it becomes a cost-bearing exercise through the court, whereas, as we've stated, it doesn't through a FOS redress scheme. There are other benefits as well. There are the uplifted costs that can be awarded and the recovery of all of the disbursements that will be required. It's quite reasonable. It's very reasonable, in fact, to bring an ombudsman claim because you only pay one flat fee. You don't pay per individual case. And there's a myriad of those positive factors. But I think the other thing, and this again comes to a question that you'll see asked in the Q&As, is about the profitability of these cases. Now, when you are going for a FOS redress scheme, and I think I touched on this last week, under a FOS redress scheme, you can only claim the money that's set out in the methodology calculation. You can only claim statutory interest up to 2%. You can't reclaim disbursements. Under a court jurisdiction, you can reclaim up to 8% statutory interest. You can claim for a higher rate of compensation because there is no cap. The Johnson judgment in the Supreme Court last year was far more generous than the FOS redress scheme was, or is proposed to be, I should say. And you can go for your legal costs as well. There is an alternative argument for some of these cases. It will not affect all of these cases, and that is that you can ask for what's known as rescission. And that puts the claimant back in the position they would have been in had they never taken out the car finance. There will be a small reduction in that money on successful cases for the use of the vehicle, but nonetheless, the message here is that the claims will be worth far more money. So what does that all mean? I've given you a lot of information, but I haven't really probably given you the crux of what it actually means. What it really means, in a true sense, if you are a defendant right now, is when do you settle? When is the right time to settle? Now, what we do know is these cases are good cases. There is a Supreme Court decision. There is no harm to these cases, no prejudice to the validity of these cases. So that's a fact, okay? You can't go further than the Supreme Court. So we have a judgment, a very good judgment in the Johnson case from last year. So now there's a lot of pressure now on the defendant banks because I think it's fair to say they've really tried and largely succeeded on Monday in kicking the can down the road in terms of pushing the redress scheme further away, which in the short term is great for the defendant banks and not great for the claimants. However, there is now, as a result of Tuesday's judgment, there's a very big pressure on them now. There's a really big call to be had, because even before the Angel judgment, they were under pressure to consider, do they settle now when they know what they're settling against, when they know what the methodology is, and they know how much, and they know they're getting a discount, as opposed to just the attack on the upper tribunal on the legal challenges. Because if the claimant law firm is successful in their arguments, that is going to increase the amount of compensation by around 50 to 55%. So they were already under the weight of that kind of concern as to whether or not, do we settle now at a lower rate, or do we wait and pay more? They're under even more pressure now that the Angel judgments come out, and I would find it hard to believe that they didn't know what the terms of the Angel judgment would have been, because they are, some of these banks with the biggest exposure have been party to that judgment. And I'd be staggered to think that they would not be giving that some serious consideration now, because they will know that if indeed the outcome of this this review that the law firms will now be doing and undertaking, that if the law firms come to the conclusion that the omnibus route is the best outcome for everybody, then they know that not only will they pay 50 to 55% more in damages, they're at risk of paying thousands of pounds on every single claim. Legal costs, disbursements, counsel, their own legal costs as well, which is going to be a huge figure. Just their legal costs, I would argue, whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know, but I would argue that even could be higher than the actual redress bill. So they're under even greater pressure now to make that decision. So it's going to be very clear to us in the next, I'd say during the course of July, what lenders' attitude towards the settling of these cases is going to be. So whilst it appears that there's a desolate situation with the kick in the can down the road, I think it actually puts more pressure on them to settle because of the risk now of these omnibus claims. So that's the update on these two significant actions that occurred this week. It actually, what seems like a short-term negative position in terms of the delays to the FOS scheme actually could have the perverse effect of speeding everything up. I can't say it's going to. I'm just giving you all of the facts so that you're aware of it. And again, like we've always said, please don't just take our word for it. Google it. It's all out in there in the press. There'll be more articles this week. There'll be, positive articles about the actions. There'll be negative actions about the articles about these actions. But, read them for yourselves, and you can see then that, this is actually the position as we stand at this moment in time. So even though sort of we haven't taken as much time to explain everything as we did last week, they are the key takeaways, the key updates from this week. So what will happen now is next week we'll have some further information on how some of those calls went, because the banks are speaking with one of our law firms within the next calendar week. So we'll be able to give you an indication of what that looked like, and we hope to give you some positive news there. We will see then how the evaluation of the Angel judgment has been, the conclusion to that, or, if we're close to a conclusion where we are with it. Then we'll be able to give you a little bit more of a clearer picture from a strategy perspective as to how the law firms intend to deal with these cases. We're going to be releasing, as Pete said, we're going to be releasing last week's Q&As. That's coming out as a document. We will have Q&As from this webinar, which we'll also take and we'll also put into a document. We'll also then send you a summary. This will all be Friday. We'll also send you a summary of the hearing that occurred on Monday, and we'll also send you sort of a summary of what the Angel decision actually means. That won't be a big article. It's just a summary of the main key takeaways off of it. So you'll be getting all of that information coming out to you on Friday. We will take a look at this week's Q&As, and we will probably condense them down because, a lot of them will have similar factors in them. And then I'll leave you with this. One person asked, will these recent events this week have any impact on the funding? I can't answer that fact with any truth. Okay, I'm not saying that in a negative or a positive way. I'm just saying that obviously they are going to be aware of it. We have a duty, to update them of any material facts, and the FOS scheme hearing on Monday would be a material fact, and the Angel decision would also be a material fact. I don't want that to alarm anyone. That statement is not meant to alarm anybody. But I've been asked the question. I wanted to address it so you could hear it from me. So yes, they are aware of them. Yes, they are considering them. They already knew about the delays on the FOS scheme, so that's not new news to them. The Angel decision is very favourable. That's a huge positive. So I can't give an answer, but I'm not expecting anything. I'm not expecting anything terribly negative from it or anything at all. But I just don't want my statements to be taken in any negative or positive fashion. I'm just giving you the facts as they are at this moment in time. We will obviously understand that position further in the coming days once everybody's had time to sit there and reflect, because it's all day Monday was taken with the FOS hearing, and then the adjudication came out, and that was quite a lengthy judgment that we had to analyse yesterday. So it does take time. These documents can't be read in 10 minutes. They can't be analysed in 10 minutes, and very careful consideration has to be given to them. We've given you a whistle-stop tour of what they actually mean, but further sort of digestion and analysis, can't say that word, needs to be done before we can give you something a bit more definitive, which is what we'll intend to do on Friday. Okay? So even though it's a shorter webinar, we hope that that there's some positivity taken from it. We're not in any negative position, since last week. We haven't gone backwards in any way. So we will be updating you as soon as there are further funding updates and the main update itself on Friday. So thank everybody for their time. We look forward to next week's webinar, and then we can analyse these things in a bit more detail. We can go into them and give you a little bit more, of everyone's thought process as to what they mean and the impacts. So we hope you'll join us on next week's webinar, and like I said, we'll be getting all that information out to you at the end of this week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.